Have you ever heard this question before? If God is real, why is there suffering? Today, we're going to unpackage that question. It's a very interesting question.
Okay, I have to jump in right here. It makes sense to ask that question based on seeing all the evidence in this realm. For example, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, huge floods, disasters, seeing the damage, the carnage, the death toll, wondering why this realm was designed that way. Okay? It's not free will. All those people didn't choose for that to happen. They were surprised and taken by surprise quite often when it did happen. Until very recently in modern times, there wasn't even warnings for hurricanes. They would hit and do massive damage. They could, wipe out 10,000 people on the shoreline. Like in the early 1900s, a huge hurricane that did massive devastation to Galveston, Texas. Okay? There's been massive hurricanes. Looking at the massive amount of evidence in this realm for suffering built into the design of the realm. That's what it's more like. And then saying, why is there all this suffering? It's a logical question. What you're doing, Sweeney, looks like Stockholm Syndrome. And I have a feeling where this is going to go. You're just going to try to blame everyone else but God. You'll blame people. You'll blame governments. You'll blame evil people. You'll blame free will. You'll blame nature. You'll blame the earth. You'll blame whatever you possibly can. Okay? Full disclosure, I did skip through this and watch some of this earlier. But I already knew in the first 40 seconds where this was going. Even though I watched part of another video of his, which I'm going to show in a second, right before this one, which is why I found this video. And you'll see what I mean. I'm going to show a little bit I'm going to show a little bit of that video as well as this one, because they kind of tie in together and where this guy's viewpoint is. But it's just remarkable, and it's very eye-opening, very telling to human psychology and to Stockholm Syndrome, the way people will do anything to take the blame off the Creator, and they'll blame anyone and anything else. Anything. It's very telling. Often they're hung up on, we have free will. That's why I give so many examples of this realm where free will doesn't play a role in it at all. Where's free will in a child or 100,000 children with leukemia? Childhood leukemia. Where's the free will? It's not free will. They didn't choose that. They didn't invent that. They didn't create that disease. These people look on the surface and think they have it all figured out. It's really weird. And they're almost impossible to break through to because they're so stubborn. They don't want to listen to the truth. They don't look at the evidence. They try to defend things without really looking at the evidence for this realm. They have a big following of over 200,000 subscribers? Of course. Of course. That makes sense. Because most people are on this level. They do eat this up.
Knowledge that leads to understanding takes time to consume. It takes time to ingest it and absorb it into your being so that your awareness broadens. And as you go through that process of purposefully, willfully, sacrificing personal time to take in information, to better understand yourself, the world, or any other thing, if you don't put in the time, you're going to have an opinion about most things that isn't actually rooted in any practical or foundational knowledge that you have obtained yourself to understand any aspect of what it is that you have an opinion about. And unfortunately, that is the condition that most people function under. They have an opinion. And if you really start to probe into the roots of the opinions that most people have, or what they think, it is highly likely and highly probable their opinion is formulated, what they think has been formulated from something they heard somebody else say.
These people look on the surface and think they have it all figured out. It's really weird. And they're almost impossible to break through to because they're so stubborn. They don't want to listen to the truth. They don't look at the evidence. They try to defend things without really looking at the evidence for this realm.
If you don't put in the time, you're going to have an opinion about most things that isn't actually rooted in any practical or foundational knowledge that you have obtained yourself.
They don't look at the evidence. They try to defend things without really looking at the evidence for this realm.
If you don't put in the time, you're going to have an opinion about most things that isn't actually rooted in any practical or foundational knowledge that you have obtained yourself to understand any aspect of what it is that you have an opinion about. And unfortunately, that is the condition that most people function under. They have an opinion. And if you really start to probe into the roots of the opinions that most people have, or what they think, it is highly likely and highly probable Their opinion is formulated. What they think has been formulated from something they heard somebody else say. To understand any aspect of what it is that you have an opinion about. And unfortunately, that is the condition that most people function under. They have an opinion. And when if you really start to probe into the roots of the opinions that most people have, or what they think, it is highly likely and highly probable their opinion is formulated. What they think has been formulated from something they heard somebody else say. And it sounded good to them, so they went with it. Think of how many facets of our world and our lives that people will function that way in, garnering a false perception, an inaccurate understanding of their world and what's really going on in it. In order to rise out of ignorance, you have got to be willing to put in the time. And sadly, most human beings don't see themselves as ignorant. And this isn't a criticism, it's just the reality of it. Most human beings don't recognize the depths of their own ignorance. This applies for all of us. I run into barriers of my own ignorance every day, so it's not like I'm being critical of the rest of the world and not looking at myself at the same time and seeing similar flaws. I'm just speaking to the overall human condition. And yeah, some of us rise above that. Some of us are, for whatever reason, given the ability to rise above that. And as I have wondered, what separates those of us that do rise above that from those of us that do not and stay content being entertained, having our version of reality crafted for us and planted into our head through the TV? What is it that snaps somebody out of that? Unfortunately, and I hate to admit this, but I think one of the biggest things that drives the human or motivates the human to begin to ask bigger questions that lead them to a level of knowledge that they didn't possess before, that shifts or broadens their awareness, their comprehension, their understanding, it has to be a lot of pain, suffering, before the human is almost by their own hand or by the world driven to a place of asking bigger questions and having the insatiable desire well up within them to search for the answers, to consume knowledge and information and spit out what tastes like shit, what doesn't work, what doesn't fit, and consume knowledge and information as beings capable of logic, reason, and all the things we're capable of. Well, in order for us to use those things, we have to be taking information into our being. And when you take control of your own self-education, you do yourself a justice that most people won't. Unfortunately, I believe that the deception that we're all seeing is so well thought out, so all-encompassing, and so persistent. And the level of awareness and knowledge and even consciousness of the vast majority of the world is such that this is actually happening. So the fact that it's going on as long as it has, and we're not seeing any major places rising up, we're not seeing anything, as I've said before, it totally and wholly lends itself to the fact that most people are not critically thinking. Most people are not formulating their own opinions. Most people are not critically thinking for themselves, applying logic and reason, and also consuming as much knowledge as they possibly can in an effort to find the truth and to better comprehend what's going on. And these people don't realize that there's a level of deception that is being levied upon the world that is so disgusting that they have to be very, very vigilant and acutely aware of what they're taking in and who's behind the message and the narrative and what those people's ideologies are, both religious and political. And when you combine all that with the ego mechanism that everybody has that needs to make us feel significant, that will do backflips to make us feel like our perception of the world is accurate, this is a problem. This is a real problem because that's a barrier that was put into the human by our Creator. And then all the barriers that get put into the human by way of the propaganda, indoctrination, lies that are fed to us from the television and all the information that comes off of that flicker box. I really believe that the one thing that's truly going to make people snap out of it and ask bigger questions is pain, suffering, and profound amounts of it, unfortunately. Because I believe that a comfortable mind is a lazy mind, in a lot of respects, for most people. And the things that people tell themselves about having better things to do, I don't have time for that, or all of the other things that people will tell themselves to justify why they're not going to take the time to take in information, to take in knowledge, to consume knowledge that helps to broaden their understanding and comprehension, that helps to broaden their awareness so that they can more accurately perceive their world and what's going on in it. From where I sit, knowing what it is that I do know, unfortunately, this is the condition of most of the world, and it lends itself directly to why the world is in the position that it's in, and as paralyzed as it appears to be. Humans don't trust each other, and you got to wonder what that's all about. Because you can have a conversation with your parents, or your brother, or your uncle, or your friend, and tell them, and they won't believe you. And then they're going to want you to tell them all the things that'll help them to see it. And if you can't package it just the right way, it couldn't be true. See, you don't know. And this game goes on. And I've encountered that enough that I've gotten to a point where it's like, short of doing these videos, where people who are of a similar mindset that find them will subscribe and blah, 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 I don't think there's too many people out there that get this, that really get this, that are humble enough within themselves to recognize, wow, I really don't know what's going on. And, well, I'm in a world where I'm responsible for, well, everything about my life. And I don't have the knowledge. How do you get people to know that? How do you show that to people? They have to see that for themselves. And a lot of things that drive the human into seeing things like that is pain, suffering, torment, agony. And I've made many videos complaining and bitching and moaning and whining like a little bitch that this is a construct of suffering, that we were engineered to suffer, all the equations that are built into humans that are very, very, very conducive to the absolute suffering of the human animal. Yep, and all those are true. I still stand behind all of that. And I still find it repugnant. But the more I've looked at humans, I begin to, unfortunately, I have to accept it because it's becoming more and more obvious to me, that unless or until humans are in a profoundly uncomfortable state of pain, suffering, or anything like that, for whatever reason, or a multitude of reasons, humans are fucking lazy unless they're in that position. And they don't start asking the meaningful questions that will give rise to finding the answers that shift perception and perspective, unless or until they're in that state of pain. And that says a lot. And it means that those of us that see what's going on, we're going to have to ride this fucking train with all of the people that don't. And when you're dealing with people who just refuse to believe what other people say, and, there's a whole fucking complex scenario there, but when people who are not in the know hear those of us that are in the know say things that are the reality of what's going on, it's all so goddamn much for them to accept, and the things sound so wild and crazy, and you're dealing with people who don't have a frame of reference to even realize that this is true, on top of the fact many people don't realize the level of evil that's out there actually exists. It creates a situation where at some point, for all of us, you just kind of have to accept it for what it is. You can't force somebody to wake up. You can't force somebody to grow up. You can't force somebody to think in a different way. They have to come to those understandings, and that has to change in them through whatever process it is that opens up in them that gives rise to that. And for most people, it's quite a challenging process, and it takes time. Something that humans don't have a whole lot of at this point. I mean, considering what's going on now, considering the Georgia Guidestones, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Bill Gates and what he is, and all the things that governments have been doing, man, all the writing is on the fucking wall, and we're basically sitting in a situation where people are just either ignorant of it, or if they take it in, they're in denial of it. Because it's all too much. It's all too fucking much. It's almost overwhelming for them. They can't believe it. They can't accept it. They don't want to accept it. And I'm just like rubbing my forehead, just like, come on, people. We all share this fucking collective reality. And being in denial of the reality that's unfolding all around us is just going to make life more painful for all the fucking people that do see that, for whatever reason it is manifested, seem to be faced with an impermeable barrier of helping to wake up the minds of other people, because they have to go through the process of that awakening themselves. It's a very personal thing. It's a very individual thing. And our waking up process is going to be predicated on a lot of the things within our own psychology. And when you're dealing with people who have no fucking clue about psychology or even their own, you're literally dealing with a meat sack that just doesn't know shit right now. And for anybody that hears me say that doesn't, it's like, oh, I'm offended and blah, blah, blah. And then they fire back and you're bad. And they immediately look for a flaw in you and try to flip it back on you and say, well, it's all, I'm so sick and tired of that little fucking tappy dance. My life has brought me to the place that I'm at for whatever reason. And I'm just kind of really easing into the acceptance of the fact that there's not going to be an immune system response. There's not going to be a global rising up. There's not, at least this version, this go around. Maybe towards the end of the year, when they start cranking this fucking thing again, and people begin to see the writing on the wall, maybe then they'll see it. Maybe then there'll be enough pain injected into their lives and enough suffering and all that other stuff, and the writing will have gotten bigger and more bright. And maybe then they'll see it. But for right now, it seems pretty obvious that most people don't see it because we're not seeing the global awakening. We might be seeing the stage being set for it. We might be seeing the pressure points being set up and poked at right now. And this could be what leads to a global awakening. I want to be able to see that the potential for the global awakening that humanity needs to take place in order for this to not destroy us. I got to hold a space in my heart and in my mind that that's possible, that something could happen. Hundreds Monkey, the creator himself. But right now, I'm not going to hold my breath for that. Because the trajectory that we're on in the current state of awareness and consciousness and knowledge and comprehension of all of this is at such a low level for the vast majority of people. And one of the biggest contributing factors to that is these fucking people believe what they're hearing coming off the television. They just haven't taken in the information that gives them the clarity and comprehension of who owns Hollywood, who owns the media, who built it all, the agendas they push forth, the narratives they push forth, the ideologies of the people who control it, both political and religious. They just don't know. And unless or until somebody acquires that comprehension, they'll never really have a doubt or a reason to wholly doubt what comes off the TV. They'll never have a reason or a basis from which to know that the television has been used as a weapon so efficiently, because most people have seen it as a mechanism of entertainment, and therefore they don't look at it for what it actually is. That's a really awesome weapon. When you can use something like the television to so profoundly influence the minds of the people who watch it and literally craft their reality for them, and they don't even know that it's happening. They don't even realize that it's happening. So at the same time, they don't realize that all this is happening. Their mind, their perception, so much is being molded for them and crafted for them. And as I've said in so many of the videos that I've done, if I can control your mind, your ass is going to follow. Eventually. I'm just coming to really deeply accept, you're not going to wake up anybody that's not willing to, that's not ready to, that's not psychologically at that place or hasn't had enough pain injected into their life to cause them to begin to ask the bigger questions. The idea, the concept, casting pearls among swine, that metaphor and what it means, it's very true. Until I woke up, I was in the category of the swine. You could have told me and I wouldn't have seen it. I would have known. It wouldn't have meant much to me. It wasn't until I woke up and I began to search for my own pearls that I began to string together my own pearl necklace. You see what I'm saying? There's just a difference. When the swine, and I say this in a metaphor because I was the swine, and people throughout my 20s casted me lots of pearls, and I didn't know what to do with them. Even in my early 30s, I had a few good pearls thrown. I didn't know. But once I experienced enough pain, I began to fucking wake up and ask bigger questions. Then I literally left the swine dynamic and became a human being on the search for knowledge and understanding of himself, and began acquiring my own pearls. And when you acquire your own pearls through your own diligent research and literally just putting in the time to evolve your mind, to evolve your comprehension of the world, to evolve yourself in every way and any way that you possibly can influence that, you gain a long string of pearls. And when you start casting those pearls to other people who are in the swine mode, you're wasting your time, no matter how pure your intentions are, or no matter how good of a heart you have. Until they're ready to eat meat, there's milk for babes. Think about that. Until they're ready to eat meat, there's milk for babes. And apparently there's a lot of people on this planet that are grown adults that are still babes, that still need their milk fed to them. And if you say the wrong thing to these people, if you happen to have an attitude about it because you're frustrated, most of them will knee-jerk response to you being arrogant, full of yourself, stuck in your ego, or pick your fucking version of how they'll invert it and try to flip it on you and immediately point out a flaw in you. This is the way they do it. This is the way the game works. When you're playing the game with psychological or emotional children, or someone who's just so fucking ignorant, lack of knowledge, all of us were there at once, so fucking ignorant that they just can't get out of their own fucking way. And unfortunately, a lot of people are in that condition. And when you're dealing with people who don't even know where to go to look for the information, it's just like, fuck, how do you spoon feed all these people all the information that they would need to know? You can't. You can't. unless you have categorized and itemized every single solitary piece of information that you've taken in so that you have a reference for it and you can go back and begin to hand it to them in a very scripted or prescribed way of taking this information because you need to know this in order to know the next step. There's a whole process that the vast majority of the world apparently hasn't gone through. So, those of us that have, I guess we're the ones that are going to be the contributors to this 100th monkey thing, if it's even real. Seems like there's evidence of it with the monkeys off the islands of Japan and the rats in New York City where they've done studies on this stuff. So I guess those of us that see if there's anything that's contributing to the 100th monkey would be those of us. And at some point, if we reach a critical mass, that it starts to spread to the rest of the world? Or what? The only other thing I could think of is something outside of this world, God, whatever, something. Helping to create a mass awakening by, I don't know, blasting the earth with some frequencies that have an effect on the genetics of the human and their mind begins to open. I know that's getting out there in the woo-woo land, but at this point, when we look at the options, there are few. I mean, it's really looking like checkmate for humanity. And unfortunately, most people don't realize it. They just don't realize if we're not at checkmate, we're at check. And we've got to do something to prevent checkmate. And if we're in checkmate, we got to find a way to kill the queen or something, in the metaphor of the chess game. And the interesting thing is people don't realize that this is a spiritual war. They just don't. And in a spiritual war, they have to tell you. So I've become very much aware of this in the last several months. In a spiritual war, they have to tell you. They have to. It's part of the rules, even though they don't follow the rules. And maybe they're not telling us everything. They're telling us a lot. And when you're dealing with people who don't even realize that all the information's out there, they just got to look for it. Again, another brick wall, another barrier. All of the information that we're going to need, for the most part, it's out there. All the information that gives any human being what they need to understand the reality of the world they live in is out there. And we tend to think, oh, they're hiding this, they're hiding that. Well, they do hide what they're doing behind a closed door. But funny enough, they write about it. They write publications about it and make very public, make them public. They make sure that we have the ability to know. And those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear kind of thing, get that? And people find it. And then they figure out a real big piece of what's going on, according to what they find, and they share it with the world. For me, it's been 15 years of gathering nuggets and pieces and pearls, and seeing the tapestry that all of that information paints before your eyes. Most people that have a good understanding of what's going on have probably experienced some version of what I said. Pain, a lot of suffering. They ask bigger questions, and it opened a Pandora's box. And unless you're willing to consume that information and go through, take the time, invest the time to consume and ingest the knowledge that gives rise to broadening your awareness, and on until the human takes that first step. Every pearl you cast will be fruitless.
These people look on the surface and think they have it all figured out. It's really weird. And they're almost impossible to break through to because they're so stubborn. They don't want to listen to the truth. They don't look at the evidence. They try to defend things without really looking at the evidence for this realm.
If you don't put in the time, you're going to have an opinion about most things that isn't actually rooted in any practical or foundational knowledge that you have obtained yourself.
These are what I've been told. It appears to be that case.
If you don't put in the time, you're going to have an opinion about most things that isn't actually rooted in any practical or foundational knowledge that you have obtained yourself.
These are what I've been told. It appears to be that case.
This is your big defense of God? I mean, I'm shaking my head. Why don't you mention the 10,000 diseases? Who invented those? Who invented the central nervous system of humans? We're designed to experience pain. These are torture suits. I didn't design this. This isn't done by my free will. I didn't create deformed children. I have children that are wheelchair bound for life or born blind. Stockholm syndrome. That's what that is. That's what the look is too. That's what the look is. People get into religion, they're brainwashed and they have Stockholm syndrome. They'll do anything to defend their creator, including harm others in many cases. That's what religious people do. They will harm others to say, well, this group has to be harmed or eliminated because they're doubting our creator. Because you fear that fucking monster. That's what it boils down to. Because if a person did what your God has done here, you would be yelling from the rooftops that they're evil, that they're a demon, that they belong in the darkest hole of earth, or if a person did even half of this, they would be considered the most evil being ever to walk the earth. Look what's done to children, innocent children that don't have any life experience. They're defenseless. They're not grown adults. They don't even have the capacity to fight back like an adult does. And your God does horrible things, designed horrible things. Or you are talking about countries and culture shock. You're trying to get way off the topic. That's what you're trying to do. Your defense is to take a big circle and go away from God. I don't know why people watch these shit channels and think they're such great thinkers. I just don't. It is frustrating. And it's not that, oh, you're jealous. Not at all. But when I see this, before I even watch the video, I know it's going to be shitty. Okay? Because you can't get that many. You can't get over 200,000 subscribers if you're speaking truth and sense and logic and using reason and logic and making good arguments and speaking things that are helpful and exposing evil and going to help you get out of this realm. You can't get 200,000. I've never seen my whole time on YouTube anybody with a channel come close to that's speaking any real fucking truth. It just doesn't work that way. The pattern holds all the time. So anyway, it is kind of frustrating after a while, but people are free to watch this shit and gobble it up like pigs to a trough if they want to. It's not going to help you get out of here, though. It won't help you a bit. The pain receptors. Who designed us this way? Have you ever burnt your fingers? So he would say, well, that's to warn you that it's hot. Well, why doesn't the pain last a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds? Burn your finger. It's not just a warning. It can burn and hurt you for days and days. Days. Get a hornet sting. That can last for quite a while. Get a bite. You ever had a dog bite where they bite you right down to your bone? Let's say a dog with dementia, an older dog that's just losing their mind. And they bite your fingers right to your bone. They don't just draw blood. There's puncture wounds. And it hurts. It really hurts. It does. It's extreme pain. And you have to look to see if your fingers are there. And you're surprised when they are because it hurts so bad you thought they took your fingers with you because they latched on. It hurts. You ever had some real pain? Have you ever been hit by something? Have you ever been hit by somebody wielding a weapon and they hit you? The blunt force. It hurts. It can leave a bump on the side of your head. Why was the body designed to feel such pain? That's why torture works. All forms of torture here. Why did God make the body that way? Didn't have to. Didn't have to be that way. I could, as a mere mortal, quote mortal, being, I could think of other ways. Didn't have to be this way. Could still experience pleasure without experiencing all this fucking torture. That God exists outside of time, outside of here. So does that make God innocent then? To create us as beings and put us in this torture realm and just watch from a safe distance? That doesn't exonerate God. That makes God a fucking coward. That makes God even more evil. If they're from a safe distance just watching this, like Earth is like a Roman Colosseum, and they're just sending in the fucking lions and tigers and the gladiators, and the slaves have barely any weaponry or protection. They have a small shield that, maybe can hold up against 2 or 3 sword strikes before it is bashed to shit or breaks in half. I mean, is this all just a sick, sadistic show for your God then? See what I'm saying? It really doesn't make your God innocent. You're trying, though. You're trying. You're really trying. But you're really not looking at the evidence here that shows the guilt of your God. So what does that make you? Does it make you afraid to look at the suffering of others and the design here? Does it make you scared? Does it make you a coward? Because that's what I think. I'm not saying this just as a mere ad hominem or an insult. I think that's true. I think he is cowardly. I think he's afraid. I think he's got Stockholm syndrome. He's like, I got to defend this, quote, God, because it's more powerful than I am, so I can blame it on humans, but I can never blame that fucking monster for this creation here. It's better, my chances are better to just blame humans and blame that all-powerful God, because it could hurt me if I start blaming it for what was created here, what was locked in here. This place is worse than a Roman Colosseum. It's worse for many here.
Looks like an egg, but essentially it's the same thing.
So this is what happens to people quite often on YouTube when they get a big following. Their ego blows up, but their intelligence doesn't, okay? They become very arrogant and full of themselves, and they have these simple views that they somehow think are brilliant.
The ego mechanism that everybody has that needs to make us feel significant, that will do backflips to make us feel like our perception of the world is accurate. This is a problem. This is a real problem because that's a barrier that was put into the human by our Creator. The biggest things that drives the human or motivates the human to begin to ask bigger questions that lead them to a level of knowledge that they didn't possess before. It has to be the ego mechanism that everybody has that needs to make us feel significant, that will do backflips to make us feel like our perception of the world is accurate. This is a problem. This is a real problem because that's a barrier that was put into the human by our Creator.
Their ego blows up, but their intelligence doesn't, okay? They become very arrogant and full of themselves, and they have these simple views that they somehow think are brilliant. And enough to make a video about it, defending God, and drawing this. I mean, you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm getting at? I'd be embarrassed if I was doing this. I really would be. If somebody said, Stephen, that's not brilliant, that's simplistic shit. It's as simple or more simple than any Christians have ever done trying to defend God before. It's just laughable. Solve world hunger next. Christopher Sideris made a video before he took his videos down saying that he had solved world hunger. Oh, fuck. Egos just get out of control.
It's possible that he has no control over what happens.
Then he's an absentee landlord and he's weak. He's not all powerful. He's not all loving. He's not any of the claims that are in the Bible then, which you seem to rely on. Okay? Then that's false. Your book that you worship is false, if that's the case. Well, there you go. You just painted yourself into a fucking corner because you're not as logical as you think you are. You're just arrogant. You're God weak, has no control over his creation. Here, he just created a fucked up hell realm, a sewer matrix, and walked away from it, washed his hands and said, well, I can't fix it. I'm going to stay out of it. Just let them all suffer in there by the millions, if not billions, if the population numbers are anything close to what they claim to be. I can't verify 7-8 billion or 7.8 billion. Could be under 1 billion, for all I know. For all you know, too. Unless you just believe everything you fucking hear. Just like you believe everything you read in the Bible. You'll see later on he mentions Sodom and Gomorrah and all this different shit. What about the worldwide flood? If God has no control, why do you wipe out every single person and child and animal except the ones on Noah's flood? If you believe all that's true, you take that as a quote fact. Wiped out everyone here. No control, but he has control to wipe out everyone in a horrific way. Dramatic, horrific way. Doesn't add up. Your Bible doesn't add up. You talk about, questions not making sense. Your Bible doesn't make any fucking sense. It contradicts completely. It's not a loving God. It's a spiteful, jealous God, which is even in there. So which is it? It's one or the other. You can't have both. Your arrogance just doesn't make it add up. This guy comes across not just as confident in his stupidity, but as arrogant. Who is the creator, the designer, the architect, you might even say, of this creation? Your God claims to have created this place, so why are you saying that's not related to God at all? Who invented earthquakes? Who invented a realm that has earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes and volcanoes? For good measure. And more, of course. I'm not going to list everything or I'd be here all night. There's a big list of evil that's built into the fucking design of this realm that you can't just take out. It would be easier to take the ingredients out of a baked cake after it's been baked. People have eaten it. Where's this guy headed? Right for the fucking recycling bin. That's where he's headed. Because of me? No. Not because of me. I don't have to do a damn thing to put him there. He puts himself there. That's where he's headed, along with millions of others that buy that garbage. If anything, people would say, well, you're being so harsh. If he listened to my video and woke up, it would be the best thing for him. He'd stand a chance of getting out of here. At this point right now, he has no fucking chance. He's going right for that recycling bin. If he passed away tonight, he would be blowing God, or what he would call, quote, God, that very second. And it would be a monster. It would be a hideous monster that even Hollywood couldn't create something with special effects to look that hideous and ugly and disgusting. Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is within you. Oh, is that why they call it a kingdom? Like you think it's a place floating on clouds and buildings on fucking clouds or whatever? Your guy, Jesus, said that the kingdom of heaven is within you. How about you read that passage? No, they leave out a lot of things. Whether it's out of laziness, out of ignorance, they just don't know, or whether it's intentional. Your Bible also says that God, in Isaiah, says that God created good and evil, darkness and light. Created everything, created both. So yeah, your God does have to take the blame for evil here, because it even admits that it created evil. So you can't get off the hook there. Or you can't get your God off the hook. That's what you want to do. You want to defend that monster. That's what you want to do. You want to defend a monster that has caused immeasurable suffering to children for thousands of years. Immeasurable. If you looked at it all, just forget about adults for a second and animals, just the harm and the suffering of children. You actually have a heart and a conscience, it would probably end you. It would be too much for a human to even be able to take. If you could even feel it just for 1 second, all of it, all that suffering that's happened to children, be a death blow. It would crush you and your central nervous system, be overloaded. You'd be fried. Be like the electric chair without the chair. Enormous, immeasurable suffering. Complete devastation here on the biggest, most sickening scale, the most sadistic level ever that anyone could even imagine. It's even beyond that. I think it's beyond the people with the greatest imaginations that have ever walked this earth. That's how bad it is. And you just didn't go through it in this lifetime. So you just don't really see it. Because you really don't look beyond yourself and look to what others endure here.
Unfortunately, and I hate to admit this, but I think one of the biggest things that drives the human or motivates the human to begin to ask bigger questions that lead them to a level of knowledge that they didn't possess before, that shifts or broadens their awareness, their comprehension, their understanding, it has to be a lot of pain. A lot of pain, suffering. before the human is almost by their own hand or by the world driven to a place of asking bigger questions and having the insatiable desire well up within them to search for the answers, to consume knowledge and information and spit out what tastes like shit, what doesn't work, what doesn't fit, and consume knowledge and information as beings capable of logic, reason, and all the things we're capable of. Well, in order for us to use those things, we have to be taking information into our being. And when you take control of your own self-education, you do yourself a justice that most people won't.
That's how bad it is. And you just didn't go through it in this lifetime. So you just don't really see it. Because you really don't look beyond yourself and look to what others endure here. And start really looking at it and adding it up and seeing the pattern. Rather defend the fucking monster that's responsible for it than look at the victims. Maybe their evil was so bad that your God got jealous and said, I can't allow that to happen. That looks like competition. That's how bad your God is. Thanks for watching. Thanks for thinking. Thanks for thinking critically, which is true thinking. True thought involves being critical and provocative. Thanks for supporting my channel.